This week's Parsha, we start Sefer Shemos, and Sefer Shemos finds ourselves in Mitzrayim, in Golus, and some very difficult Parshias of the Makkos and the Shibud of Mitzrayim, and then finally the Geula with the wondrous Makkos. And we're going to learn at Beis Halevi about some of the Midrashim about what caused the hatred of the Mitzrayim towards the Jews, and how they came out in the Geula in the end. Of course, this was Gezerah from HaKadosh Baruch Hu that they should be in Golus, they should be in Shibud Mitzrayim. This was part of the Grand Master Plan. But we're going to see what Klal Yisrael did, because they were aware of this in the first place, that they had to be in Golus, and they were frightened, and what they did. And I would venture to say that this is one of a central theme, I think, in Sefer Beis Halevi. This idea, maybe we've touched upon it before, and you'll see soon the basic idea. And we start with the pasuk in Yechezkel. The pasuk says, let's see if I can find it here. The first line, and it's a famous pasuk. It's in the Haggadah Shel Pesach. The end of it, at least, is hard pasuk. And as for your birth, on the day you were born, your umbilical cord was not cut, nor were you washed with water until you were smooth, the skin becomes smooth, nor were you swaddled, or nor were you salted. I guess that's some kind of treatment they did to the skin. And you weren't swaddled. Okay, is this part brought by you? Mm-hmm. Okay, yes, you have this also. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, it says in the pasuk, next pasuk, I'm skipping a pasuk. It says in the okay, I can read it. You don't have this pasuk. Nobody had mercy on you at this time to do any of these treatments to take care of you. That you were thrown into the field, in in your dirtiness, in the day you were born. So Hashem says, I came along. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, "Va'ever alayich," I passed upon you, va'erich, and I saw you mispaiseses b'damayich. And I saw you that you were wallowing in your blood. Va'omer lach, and I said to you, b'damayich chayi, va'omer lach, b'damayich chayi. Famous words, we say them by Bris Milah as well. Okay? And it means, in your blood you shall live. I said to you, the second time it repeats, in your blood shall you live. Okay? And then the psukim afterwards are also brought in Haggadah, how Hashem took care of Klal Yisrael. Okay, so now we're going to see that there's more than one pshat over here of what is this dam that we're talking about. And Beis Halevi is going to tell us that Pashup Pshat is that the Bnei Yisrael, even though they were so filthy and so dirty and wallowing in blood, Hashem still had mercy and took care of us and took us out of that situation. So let's look inside Yechezkel. Okay, we just read the first few lines. Hinei Parshas Perush Psukim V'chein Perush Rashi V'cholam Mefarshim Tehu Mashal Al Yisrael Shahayu Me'usim U'Melachlachim Be'ez Shibudam B'Mitzrayim. The Pasuk Pshat in the Pasuk and the Mefarshim explain, like Rashi explains, that it's saying that Klal Yisrael, when they were enslaved in Egypt, they were dirty and they were disgusting, and it compares them to a tinaik bedam, like a baby that's all dirty, bedam haleda, with the blood of the birth, and it wasn't washed off. I saw you that you were wallowing in your blood. So Hashem says, with your blood you shall live. Now, according to this interpretation, it seems like it must mean that it's saying, even though you have all this blood, still you shall live. even though you look so hopeless, and you seem so dirty, and no one's taking care of you, and you need all this rachmanus, even in your dam, you shall still live. Okay, that's a PARSHA pshat he's saying. Usually the Rabusa means like that it's a chiddush. It's even so. Even in this blood that's disgusting and you're dirty, still you shall live. Even in this state of nivo, of being unclean, still you shall not die. Okay, now that's one pshat. So that's a beautiful pshat. Hashem says that He's going to take us out of that dirtiness and He's going to take us out of that helplessness. But there's another pshat Gemara brings, also a famous pshat. But I am in Maseches Krisos, and this is why we say it by the bris milah, because the Damaya Chayi, one of the dams, is referring to the dam, the blood of the bris milah. Okay, so it's a whole new pshat. But I am in Maseches Krisos. The Amar, it says in the Gemara, Taftes. Our fathers came into a covenant with Dam Milah. That was how they entered into a bris with Hashem. If the Gemara darshans it from this pasuk that Hashem saw us in that state, and it says b'damaya chayi, the Darshlei, the Gemara says that what, according to the drasha, what is this blood that you shall live with? It's referring to two bloods: the Dam Pesach, the blood of the Korban Pesach, the Dam Milah, and the blood of the mitzvah of Milah. It means Klal Yisrael had two mitzvahs, and these two mitzvahs came with blood. And because these two mitzvahs they had, so Hashem brought them into a bris to save them, to give them the Torah. In other words,
sorry, what two different bloods from which?
One blood is the blood of the Karban, of the Shechita of the Korban Pesach, and they took the blood and they did avodah with it. They put it down on the doorpost, like they were instructed, and they also had the dam of a milah. When a person has a bris milah, there's dam, and they had a bris milah when they left Mitzrayim. When they left Mitzrayim, they had bris milah. So, in other words, HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave them these two mitzvahs with which for them to merit to come out, that He knew that these two would help them have the schus to be able to merit to be saved. So He gave them, He initiated for them something for them to do, that they could be zocher. According to this pshat, the second pshat, that it's the opposite. Because of the dam you shall live. Because of the merit of the blood of the mitzvah, so that's why you shall live. The mitzvahs elu yaginu alecha v'higoyal mishibudam shemitzrayim. That these mitzvahs are going to protect you, that you should be saved from the enslavement of the Egyptians. So it's a whole different pshat. Instead of even in your state of blood, I'll save you, means because of the mitzvahs that you come with blood, that's why I'll save you. And that bothers Beis Levi, that it's the opposite. The drash is the opposite connotation of the pshat. So he's going to explain to us, instead of a new pshat in the drash, this time he's going to explain the new pshat in the pshat. That a new understanding in the simple way of reading the pasuk, that you'll see that not only it's because of the dam of the Pesach and the Milah that they were saved, but it was also because of the dam of the state that they were in Mitzrayim, that's why they were saved. Okay, we'll see more what that means. Gam yesh lahavin, lama amar hakasav shnei pa'amim. Why did the pasuk say two times? Now, the simple thing, what do we say? Why did it say twice? Because there's two dams, dam Pesach, dam Milah.
What did Rashi say to them?
So, but the thing is that it's Lashon Rabim. The Beis Levi says that's Lashon Rabim already. So, Leza Inyan, the other Mefarshim say this as well, that the Chara, it's already Lashon Rabim, it's already plural without the repetition. Leza Inyan Remez Kfelas Advarim. What is it saying by repeating it? again, and I'll say to you, it was through your blood you shall live. And then again, וגם לפי הדרש, תקרא אדם פסח ומילה, הם שני מצוות מכל מקום, הרי בכלל דמייך משמע גם כן שני דברים, תלשון רבים, ולמה קבע כוסף דבריו. Why did the pasuk repeat it? So we have two questions. One question is that we have two pshatim here, and they seem to be opposites. One is that because even though you're in such a bad state, you still live. And second one is that because of the mitzvahs, because of the dam, that's why you live. And that's not so good to have opposites in the same shot, okay, in the same meaning of the pasuk. And secondly, the question is what's the repetition of the pasuk saying it twice? Okay. Now, here we're going to see some more. We once learned about the Beis Levi, about Bris Milah, and it's very interesting to compare that one to the one that we're going to learn now. A similar idea. We'll focus on what he says here. Okay. Now, there's an interesting pasuk. It's the beginning of the PARSHA of Tehillim in this parak, capital Kofei, is famous, but the end is not as well known. And it's a capital, parak that deals with thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for many different things that He did for us, and amongst them is a whole sipur of miracles, the story of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us throughout our history, starting and going through the when we were in Mitzrayim. So, the beginning of the parak.
We say this capital in Pesukei Zimra.
Yeah, Pesukei Zimra. Hadil Hashem Kir V'Shmaya Divan Maliloisav. The beginning of Pesukei Zimra. Shir Lai Zarma Lai Sichel B'Chol Nefloisav. Okay, and we go on. Hisalu V'Shem Kodsha Yismach L'Mevak Hashem. Okay, Zichron Nefloisav. We recount the wonders that Hashem did. She'asa Ma'asav Mishtefiu. Okay, and then it goes on, and Hashem remembered the covenant with us, and so it says like this. Skipping some psukim, and it says, let's see, like this. Vayava Yisrael Mitzrayim. Later on in the parasha, it speaks about all the makkos, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu says this on the makkos. It says, Klal Yisrael came to Mitzrayim. V'Yaakov gar b'Eretz Cham. At that time, Yaakov was living in the land of Cham. Vayofer es meaning Mitzrayim comes from Cham. And if you look in there earlier in Parshas Noach, Vayofer es Amoy me'od, Vayatimeyu mitzarav. Okay, so let's translate that pasuk. It means, okay. Okay, according to the article translation here, we're going to see in the Drash a different pshat. He made his nation exceedingly fruitful, and and made it mightier than its oppressors. Okay, Vayafer lashon peri, fruitful. Vayafer as Amoy. Now we know that Vayafer could mean something else. Vayafer, exactly. We find Hafaras in the Darim. Hafara, the lashon of Vayafer could mean to forsake, to leave behind, to release. Okay, good. So. Vayatzimeyu mitzarav, according to the translation here, it means, and he made it mightier than its oppressors. Hafach libam l'snei amoy, and then it says something interesting. It seems like this isn't such a good thing for the Jewish people, and he turned their hearts. He turned the hearts of the Egyptians to hate his nation. L'sno amo, l'snakel ba'avadav, to plot against his servants. Okay, and then, so this one pasuk is the pasuk we're going to focus on. Why is this something that we're thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned the Egyptians' hearts against the Jewish people, to start planning and plotting. This is sandwiched in the middle of this parak of all the wonderful things HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for us. And then it says, Moshe saved us, Shalach Moshe Abdai, Aaron Asher Bachar Bai, okay, and all the wonders. So, it doesn't even say it like that this happened on its own, or that it happened because of the Egyptians. It says Hashem turned their hearts against the Jewish people. So, okay. So now let's look in the beginning of the second paragraph here. But Tehillim, Haydu Lashem Kara Vishmai Kira Vishmai Haydu V'Alim Alilaisab Shir Laizamulai Gomer. More psukim, skips the psukim. Vayofer es Aman Me'oid Vayatzimeyu Mitzarav. Okay, and now this last pasuk, Hafach Libam, he turned the hearts of the Egyptians, Lisno Amai, to hate the Jewish people, Lisnak El Bavadav, to start plotting against his servants, the servants of Hashem. Shalach Moshe Avdai Aaron Asher Hashem sent Moshe and Aaron, who he has chosen, to save them. Now, so we have to understand, says the Beis Halevi, this whole Mizmar is praising Hashem. And here it says something which seems to be problematic and difficult, and it's Sarah that Hashem sent to the Jewish people. L'char yesh lavin, to call him Mizmar lechem mesaber chastei Hashem she'asher Yisrael me'al shayiligai. V'lama hizkir kan ma shehavach leid Mitzrayim. So why is it mentioning here that which HaKadosh Baruch Hu turned the hearts of the Egyptians yisnu aisam? Is this something that's good? Is this something that we're thankful for? This is not b'chlal the tovos. This makes the whole salvation in the end even not so praiseworthy, not such a great chesed from Hashem. Why? Because in the beginning the whole thing came from Him in the first place. Since in the beginning they weren't enslaved just on their own. Hashem turned the hearts of the Egyptians. Okay. And besides, the thing itself you have to understand. Why did Hashem do that? What was the sin that the Jewish people, this was coming to them? It doesn't say why the song came. Okay. Now, we're not going to read the whole entire Beis Halevi here, even the parts that I copied. Even though I copied a lot, this is a long drasha. The Beis Halevi launches into a long essay over here, explaining that the Jewish people, based on the Medrash, we'll see part of it. They were Mayfair. And it says by Yofer, here it's talking about being Mayfair, the bris milah. And the Jewish people, even before the enslavement, they somehow turned away from and left behind the mitzvah of bris milah. And that's problematic for a couple reasons. One reason is because we're going to find that another medrash says that they did bris milah. So in one place it says that they were a yofer, they left the bris, they forsook the covenant of bris milah. And in another place we find that they still did perform the mitzvah of bris milah.
According to the first view, when did they do bris milah? I remember hearing something about this. In the Bamidbar, or was he Yeshua?
Well, they did a bris milah when they left Mitzrayim, and they brought the Korban Pesach. But then, while they were in the Midbar, they didn't. That's a separate story. Yeah, that's a separate story. Why in the Midbar they didn't do it. Right. And then when they got to Israel, in times of Yeshua, when they came in. That's right. But, so here, we're focusing on the pre-Midbar times, while they were in Egypt, before they were enslaved, that according to one Medrash, part of the enslavement, part of the hatred that the Egyptians turned towards the Jewish people, they turned on them and started to hate them, was HaKadosh Baruch Hu sent because they weren't performing the bris milah.
And the Mitzri were.
The Mitzrayim were still work. Saying they still work. It sounds. Okay, I don't know the answer to that, but he's saying the question is that Yosef got all the Egyptians to be mahul, so it would seem that the Egyptians were still mahul. According to the Medrash, the Egyptians we're going to see the Egyptians were not mahul anymore. Maybe that was just one generation and didn't last.
But wasn't the reason why Chris Baruch took us out of this trend is because of the fact that they didn't change their name, they did just Mila?
And they didn't change their names. Does it say they didn't change bris milah? Does it say that?
No, the clothing.
The clothes, the names. I don't.
Yes,
the language.
The names.
Prior to the it was a massive bris milah.
Massive bris milah, yeah.
That's a medrash, right?
Okay. So anyway, the Beis Halevi is going to explain to us that what's going on. These Jewish people, it wasn't so long since since they knew Yaakov Avinu and the Shvatim, and not so many generations since the mitzvah of Bris Milah was given to Avraham Avinu, and why all of a sudden they're being made for the Bris Milah, they're turning away from it. So let's see a little bit, and then we'll skip, and we'll get to the punchline here. The lesson.
If you have no bris milah, the fact that you change the name is like being these days being kosher style. I'll eat treif, but it's going to be kosher style.
Okay.
Well, there are also idol worshippers as well. So it was kosher style.
Right. Okay. Now that's another thing, that the Jews were idol worshippers. Now we're going to see more in the Beis Halevi about that. But the Beis Halevi, he brings from the Medrash that they became idol worshippers. They were like the Medrash says, Halalu Avdei Avodah Zarah. These, the Egyptians, are serving Avodah Zarah. Halalu Avdei Avodah Zarah. And there was a big kitrug. There was a taina on the Jewish people. How could they be saved in the Kriyas Yamsuf, in the splitting of the sea? Why should he save these ones and drown these ones? But the Beis Halevi brings from the Medrash that all that came after many years of servitude and being oppressed, and they didn't start off right before they became oppressed as idol worshippers. So why is it here that this Bris Milah they're turning away from?
But in a way, Kodesh Baruch didn't have a choice, regardless of how Bnei Yisrael, behaved. They had no choice, because he promised Abraham that yes, your children will be. Will be going through hardship, but I will take them out. At that point in time, Kodesh Baruch Hu had no choice, because if he didn't fulfill that, then what he told Abraham wouldn't have been true.
Right. I hear you. Hashem took them out, and he took them out quicker, and he gave them these mitzvahs to help them get out. So you're asking what kind of kitrug could there be in Shemayim anyway, because Hashem promised?
Right. At that point,
okay, I don't know how the Darchei Shemayim work, but Baruch Hu had some system. There was an answer back to those prosecuting angels that said this, and we're going to see perhaps today what that was. But there was this is all parenthetically. They did serve Avodah Zarah, and there was this kitrug, there was this prosecution against them, but at the same time, that didn't come right away. It was only years later. So what's going on here? That the Jewish people are being mayfair. They're breaking the covenant of the Bris Milah.
Can I just?
Yes, go ahead.
A covenant only works if both sides of the covenant continue to exist. Okay. If it gets to the point where the Jews, from a point of view of God, don't exist anymore, there's no covenant.
So it has to be two-sided.
That's what the argument was.
But certainly, on initial reading, there doesn't seem to be any condition. We didn't set any condition.
No, that's the nature of a covenant. Is that both sides of the covenant have to continue to exist.
And think it further then.
Because Rabbi Kadwa used to pray
how many people
say the Jews before they don't exist anymore.
No, I'm saying how many people still have to, obey the covenant. Just one. So that goes back to Avram's. If there are 10, if there are 50, there's 40, there's 30.
It's one.
Just one. Okay.
Okay.
So since we had Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron,
that's right.
then
okay.
So good. That's a good point. Okay. Now, so we go to the next paragraph. In Medrash Rabbah, Pasuk Vayakam Melech Chadash HaMitzrayim Dezel Shana Rabbanan Paschi Laha. Now, this pasuk Vayakam Melech Chadash HaMitzrayim is the first pasuk that starts the whole era of the enslavement, that there was a new king that came up upon Egypt, whether it was a really new king or not, but that's where it all began, from that pasuk in here in PARSHA Shemos. So the Medrash says, Medrash Rabbah, Hashem Bagadu, they betrayed HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kibanim Zarim Yaladu, they bore strange children, Ata Yaichlem Chadash Eschalkeim. Okay, we're going to see in the let me see if I can find this pasuk in Hosea now, because I don't know the exact translation, but the Ata Yaichlem Chadash Eschalkeim, according to the Medrash, Chadash means that there was something new going on here, and Chalkeim means that they were nechlak, they divided from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Let's see what the Pashup Pshat in the Pasuk is. Hishaya Hey. Okay. So it says. Okay. Okay. It says Pasuk Zayin. Hashem Bagadu Kivanim Zarim Yaladu Ata Yechlim Chaydesh Eschalkeyem. They betrayed Hashem, for they begot alien children. Now a month, I don't know what a month is, will devour them. Any help? Okay, something
again.
M-O-N-N-T-H. Okay.
A month.
What's that?
Chaydesh.
A chaydesh. Oh, okay.
So
So
it's
it's saying
not Chodesh, it's chaydesh.
in 1 month, in 1 month, now a month will devour them.
Is it plural or singular?
Okay, now according to Rashi, it means the month of Chodesh Av. Interesting. Okay, we have to look further into that. As Chalkehem, with their portions. Okay. Now let's see here, according to the Medrash, what this pasuk means. Says. When Yosef Hatzadik was nifter, Heiseru bris Milah. So they were made for the bris, the covenant of Milah. They said, let's be like the Egyptians. Mikanat Lamed. So from here you learn. Shemos Malan. That Moshe gave them bris Milah, B'tzeisan mi Mitzrayim, when they left Mitzrayim. V'kivan. Now we're going back now, before what Moshe did. When the Jewish people were maker, they forsook the covenant. Kadosh Baruch Hu turned around the love that the Egyptians had favor towards, and they had good feelings and a friendship towards the Jewish people. L'sina, and he turned it to hatred. Shenemar says in the pasuk that we read before, Hafach libam, Hashem turned their heart, Lisnai Amai. Lisnakel Avada. Hashem turned their heart to hate this nation, to start plotting against His servants. Like it says, this to fulfill what this pasuk says now in Hosea, going back to the pasuk, Ata Yoichal Chodesh Eschalkehem. What is the Chodesh? Melech Chodesh. It's referring to a new king. She'amad b'Mitzrayim. They came up in Mitzrayim, and he brought new gezeros upon them. Okay, and now the same drasha is in another medrash. Beis Levi found Yalkut Hosea, Pasuk Zeh, Hashem Bagadu. Now they didn't have search engines back in those days, but even so. Besides the Beis Levi's tremendous Bekias, but there's another way. If you look at the related psukim that are brought in the Medrash, sometimes you can find the related Medrash. So this pasuk anyway was brought, and there's a Yalkut, a Medrash, collection of Midrashim on that pasuk. So Yalkut Hosea, a pasuk says, Hashem Bagadu, Kibanim Zarim Yaladu, maybe Gamkein Zadrash. It brings the same Medrash. Rak B'Shinu Lashon K'tzas, but this time it's brought a little differently. V'Amar Gamkein. The Butler Mitzvah Milah. Messiah says also that they didn't do Milah. The Zelushane, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Atem chidashtem aleichem avoda. You invented this new avoda. Okay, we'll have to see what that means, because what does it mean? The Beis Levi is going to ask, you invented, you start doing something new? What do you mean start doing something new? They stopped doing something. They stopped having Bris Milah. But it says here in the pasuk, in the Medrash, Atem chidashtem aleichem avoda. You made new avoda, some new service on yourself. Afani mamid mishum echadash aleichem gzeros. I'll put on you somebody that makes new gezeros on you, new decrees. Okay? Eschalkehem. What does Eschalkehem mean? Shenechleku mi'achar Kadosh Baruch Hu. They turned away from Kadosh Baruch Hu. Okay. Now we don't have time to read more now, but the idea here is that the Beis Levi is going to say is that there's something called Maishech Es Arlasai. Maybe you heard of this. And the idea is that the Bnei Yisrael, based on another medrash, did do Bris Milah. and they even did bris milah, even though at some point the Egyptians maybe were telling them not to. So they didn't forget the covenant they made with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and their forefathers made. But what they did is they wanted to hide it. They wanted to make it that physically they wouldn't look different than the Egyptians. They wanted to try to make it become similar outwardly as much as they could to the Egyptians. And that's what they did. They were Maishech Esar Lasai. Now, Maishech Esar Lasai is a way of making it that somehow pulling the skin back, even though the foreskin was cut off, is a way to pull back skin with a lot. It's not so easy to do this. This is avoda, chidush. And maybe it couldn't be painful, but to make themselves similar that it shouldn't be apparent. So they weren't breaking the mitzvah, but at the same time they were hiding it, and they were trying to become more similar to the Egyptians in an attempt to get out of the gezerah that was upon them, that they knew that they were going to have this hatred that the Egyptians were going to have towards them. So what did they do? They said, we'll become more similar to them.
This happened in Shemot.
Thank you. Well, that this is Moshe Chesar Lasai. What? Okay. Interesting. So that's what was their intention in doing this, because they wanted to get out of being different. But they weren't even doing any Isser Deraisa. Later on, the Rabbanan, there was an Isser against doing this. And if a person who wants to leave the Jewish people, and he's embarrassed about it, and he wants to bedafka go out of his way and say, I don't want this milah anymore. I'm getting rid of the milah. So there's other sources that he doesn't have a chelek in Olam Haba, such a person who's mivazeh, the whole thing, that tries to get rid of the bris milah. But that's not what they were doing here. What they were doing here is they said, we want the covenant, we want to be the Jewish people, but we want to hide it. That's what they were doing. And we want outwardly to be like the Egyptians.
The fact that they really didn't have to. In other words, it's interesting how this whole thing took place, because one of the psukim that says, "Vayomer Elamo Hine Amnei Yisrael Rav Va'otzum Mimenu." They are more than we are, and they're stronger than we are. If that's the case, why didn't they fight back? In other words, once they saw that the tide was turned against them, if in fact they were more than the Egyptians.
Okay, good question.
Stronger than they were. Then
I'm not going to go into that now. Okay, why didn't the Jewish people fight back?
This reminds me of I saw a movie on TV about the Holocaust, and this was during the Eichmann trial. One of the prosecutors asked one of the survivors, there were 200 of you and there were 6 Germans there. Why didn't you fight back? And the guy couldn't give an answer. And I'm saying it's a situation where
it's a whole discussion. I know there are people who have such a title on them.
No, what I'm saying
we weren't there.
What I'm saying is that the answer would have been because eventually we will get killed. Yes, eventually we may have, but at that point in time where there are 200 against 6, you would have, at least you were able to do something. You would have saved yourself at that point in time. Whatever may have followed later on, would have followed later on.
If you read Rabbi Lau's book, I don't know if any of you have read it, you'll see that he discusses this attitude, and it gives a different perspective than why.
This reminds me of it very clearly says that they themselves admit that Bnei Yisrael Rav Ba'otzum Mimenu. So how did the whole thing take place?
Right. So there was a certain chachma that it came.
The Civil War.
Okay, so I just want to finish off, and I have one more minute to go to wrap things up here. Okay, so now the Beis HaLevi, basically, so he says like this, that the pasuk pshat in the pasuk of the erech what is the pasuk again? Va'ever alayich va'arech misplaceses b'demayich va'emelach b'demayich chayi va'emelach b'demayich chayi. Even according to the pasuk pshat in the pasuk, what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying to the Jewish people is that I the reason why the reason why this whole thing. Let's go back for a second. We saw in Tehillim that in Haydel Hashem Kitayv Kufhei the Kir V'Shmai that this was a chesed that God Baruch Hu did for the Jewish people to turn the nations against them, the Egyptians against them. Why was that a kindness? Why was that a chesed? And the answer is because HaKadosh Baruch Hu knew that the Jewish identity had to be preserved. And as long as they weren't trying to become similar to the Egyptians, so it wasn't necessary for this hatred for to turn the hearts of the Egyptians against them. They would retain their identity anyway because they weren't trying to become similar to the Egyptians. But now that they started trying to look like the Egyptians, they said, we'll still keep our Jewish heritage, we'll still keep our Jewish identity, but we'll look like the Egyptians, outwardly will be identical to the Egyptians. So if that will be the case, so then that's the end, that's the beginning of the end of their Jewish identity. And because of that, Hashem turned the hearts of the Egyptians against them so that they could still retain their own identity. And that's why he brought them to Mitzrayim in the first place, based on the Zohar, that Egypt was a place that wouldn't want to have anything to do with them in the long run. They would look down upon them, and they would be disgusted by them. So it was actually the dam. It was actually the lichluch, this dirtiness that the Jewish people had, like the baby. It's just born, and it's covered with blood, and it's all filthy. And that filth, that's part of what caused the Jewish people to be free, to be saved from the Egyptians. Because if the Egyptians' hearts would not have turned against the Jews, and they would have wanted to have what to do with the Jews and to be friends with them, so then what would happen? The Jews would never get out of there. But because they were so disgusting in the eyes of the Egyptians, since they were mispaiseses b'damayich, so the HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, b'damayich chayi, that is what's going to cause you to be able to come out, because the Egyptians' hearts are turned against you. That's why you're able to come out separate from them. So the Beis HaLevi, at this point, in the end of his piece, he gets to be contemporary, and he says, I don't know if I copied this or not. He says, all the way in the end of I copied. I think I copied it. It says. Okay. I don't know if I copied it, but he says that it's the same thing that you see in his times, and he even mentions the nations that they're living amongst, and he says that that it would seem that the hatred that the Goyim have should be getting less, because the nature of hatred is that if there's a cause for the hatred, so as time goes on, it wears off. The hatred gets less and less. You forget what you were fighting against. It could get less, but he says no. We see it's getting stronger, and so he says that the more that we're in Galus, and there's a danger that through becoming more like the exiles, that we're going to just get swallowed up and become like the other nations. So that's the cause why the hatred. It's from Hashem. That hafach libam lisnai amai. That in order for us to be able to retain our own identity, and we should be zocheh to remember that we're a separate nation from the Goyim, and keep that proud, that we don't have to just be like the nations and look like them, and Baruch Hu should save us from this galus very soon.